Friday edition of the NBA Exchange. Your host Dexter Henry here with you, and we are getting closer to the NBA Finals. Believe it or not, after a crazy season, condensed 72 games, we are closer. One team has already punched their ticket. That's the Phoenix Suns. My producer Greg, we had that one right. And another team came closer to getting to their first NBA Finals in nearly half a century. That was the Milwaukee Bucks. We've got a lot to talk about on Friday edition of the NBA Exchange. Just when you thought you had the playoffs figured out, injuries here, injuries there, injuries hampering the Bucks and Hawks series. Trae Young and Giannis Antetokounmpo both out for Game 5. No two-time MVP for the Bucks in this contest. You know what? It was no problem at all. The Bucks continue to do exactly what they've done in this series, and that is dominating in the paint. They were 33 of 50 points in the paint. They were led by Brook Lopez. Yes, Brook Lopez, looking like he was 2012-2013 season with the Brooklyn Nets. Brook Lopez dominated the Hawks with 33 points in this contest. And it wasn't just him alone. He had plenty of help. That Bucks supporting cast, they absolutely need to step up in this game, something we did not see in Game 4. And plenty of Bucks players were stepping up in this contest, including 5 Bucks players that had at least 22 points in this contest. So a really good job by them in this performance. Now the Bucks have a 3-2 series lead, and they're one win away from returning to the NBA Finals. As I said earlier, they haven't been there in nearly half a century. And who knows? We don't know if we'll have Giannis Antetokounmpo for Game 6. We don't know if we'll even see Trae Young. But the Bucks, they got to be feeling good about the way their role players stepped up. Now, we'll put a caution here. This was at home. Now we'll have to see if they can do it on the road, Game 6 in Atlanta. Now, the way things have been so unpredictable this playoffs, particularly around injuries, has made it hard for a lot of people to pick and bet games on the NBA. And looking ahead to Game 6, which will be Saturday night in Atlanta, Bucks taking on the Hawks. What's on the line? Bucks with a win, they get to go to the NBA Finals. Hawks get a win, and they force a Game 7, which I think all of us basketball fans, we'd like to see. Why not? Especially if we can get the stars back. But if you're looking to bet on this game, man, it's a tough one. The line in the previous game was at -2.5. The line for Game 6 has opened up at the same, that -2.5. But this time, instead of favoring the Bucks, which were the home team, obviously in Game 5, this favors the Hawks, the home team in Game 6. Why this is a tough game to bet? I think a lot of it has to do with the uncertainty that we talked about. You don't know whether the stars will be available. I think there's a greater chance that you will see Trae Young play in this game, and the Hawks absolutely need it. They're going to need that lift, especially at home, maybe more than you would see Giannis play in this game. The Bucks might want to give him an extra day to rest. They can play with sort of house money if you look at it, knowing they can have a Game 7 at home in their back pocket. However, we know in sports, you want no parts of the Game 7. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So the Bucks should be motivated. But why I think this is hard to bet, as I said, if you're going to bet the line at -2.5, with the Hawks being the favorite, is we don't know who's going to play. So you're going to have to watch that line very closely as the next 24 to 48 hours progress. That is something to keep an eye on. Now, the over-under for this game, 216.5, sort of right around where both teams have been scoring, but that number is coming down a little bit because of not having those star players. You can't expect the Hawks to be as offensively potent as they are with Trae on the court, as we've seen, and the Bucks also haven't nearly been as efficient in games without Giannis. It's a small sample size, so one game in the second half where they struggled in Game 4, and in Game 5, obviously a lot of role players played well. I tend to not like role players playing well on the road as they do at home. I think you will see that happen. Maybe some of the Bucks players struggle here on the road, especially if they play without Giannis. I would expect the Hawks players to play better at home in this Game 6. So if I was going to bet here and I was going to get that line to 2.5 points with Atlanta being the favorites, I would go Atlanta in this contest, especially if they get Trae Young here. I think that can be a huge boost for them. I think that can be a really good energizer for them in their offense with the crowd behind them, not wanting to end their season on their home court and force a Game 7 in Milwaukee. So if I had to do this, obviously, don't know if these stars are going to play, but I'd be willing to put a couple of dollars down on Atlanta at the favorites, 2.5. If you feel really good about Atlanta winning this game, and maybe you want to bet them all out on that money line, that's something you could do. I'd stay away from the over-under. Too much uncertainty there. But go with the Hawks here. I think they'll be motivated. They don't want their season to end. They've shown a never say die attitude, and why not? We want to see Game 7. While the NBA Finals still isn't set, there is a team that recently got bounced out of the playoffs. That is the Los Angeles Clippers. A lot of jokes about the Clippers. Clips gonna clip. We've heard this time after time, but they were very resilient in this postseason. To talk about the Clippers and their future, I have SB Nation writer Sabreena Merchant here joining me. Sabreena, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, so glad to have you on. I think this was an interesting season to look and evaluate the Clippers, right? Last year, they blew the 3-1 lead in the bubble. This year, they come back in 2 series from being down 2-0. Some people may say, hey, they didn't win it all. This is a team that had championship aspirations. How do you look at this Clippers season? Is it a success or is it a failure?
You know, I told a lot of people before the start of the season that as long as they got to the Western Conference Finals, I would view this season as a success just because that is a mark that has never been reached in franchise history. And I think to get to the conference finals the way they did, you know, losing Kawhi Leonard before the final 2 games of that series against Utah and still managing to just completely wreck the Jazz on the way to the conference finals, this playoff run is absolutely a success. And it's a little frustrating because on the one hand, you know, the Clippers kind of got rid of so many of their demons by finally winning that second series and getting to the Final Four of the NBA. But on the other hand, it's almost like the truest existence of the Clippers curse that in this season where like the field was seemingly wide open, you know, you've got a Phoenix team that's good, but not great. And you've got a Milwaukee team that has injured Giannis and Atlanta team that has an injured Trae Young. And it seemed like the path was there to really go further and take the title because I do believe that this was one of the 2 best teams during the regular season. The Nets would be right there with me. That even for the Clippers to get this far and still fall short, like feels like they're still cursed just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure the fan base feels that way. Like, hey, Clippers can't get over the hump here. Why can't they get it done? But they did, like I said, they did show some resiliency throughout this playoff. So when you look at this Clippers team, Sabreena, would you say they've turned a corner? Is this a point where you can be excited if you're a Clippers fan, where you might be able to say, hey, it isn't the same old Clippers here?
I think so. You know, it's going to be a really interesting offseason because there's so many free agents on this team and really important ones in terms of what they're trying to do going forward. So it's hard to say like what they have moving forward because this team could look wildly different next year. I don't anticipate that it will. Like, you know, Kawhi Leonard is obviously the biggest free agent and all indications are that he's going to return to Los Angeles. So if he comes back, then you're basically running back the same team. But yeah, I do think that like with the leadership of Ty Lue, who just proved to be so much of an improvement over Doc Rivers, and with this, you know, renewed Paul George, who had what I believe to be his like first really good postseason in the Western Conference. We've got Kawhi Leonard coming back, hopefully with some rest maybe, and a group of young players on the Clippers who have actually started to develop, which is something that legitimately hasn't happened since like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. So there's just a lot to be happy about. And to finally get that one hump cleared of like getting to the conference finals, I think just means so much from a emotional perspective. You know, it's not just like, oh God, like, is this going to happen again? Or the Clippers going to figure out a way to lose again? Because like they didn't, you know, blow it this time, right? I mean, I do think that there's a way to look at that conference finals and think like, yeah, they blew game 2 and they could have won game 4. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, like I don't think they gave up an opportunity to go further than they could have. Like this was a tired, depleted team. And I think they did about as well as could have been expected considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I think so too. And you mentioned Ty Lue. We got to look at the coaching job this guy's did. 1, he got the team to the Western Conference Finals, which they had never been to before. And 2, I saw this and I didn't even realize this. He was the first Clipper coach to win multiple playoff series while obviously getting to the Western Conference Finals, for something that nobody has ever done. I mean, you talked about him being an improvement over Doc Rivers. How huge was that in this turnaround, if you want to say, for the Clippers, and also part of that excitement for them going forward? Should more people be talking about Ty Lue as one of the best coaches in the league?
I think there's this reputation that Ty Lue had before the start of the season that he was just the guy who was coaching LeBron in Cleveland. And a lot of his success sort of got diminished as the fact that, like, oh yeah, anyone who coaches LeBron has a good chance of winning a title. And I think we're going to see that happen with Frank Vogel a little bit coming up, just to see what his reputation looks like once he's, gone through a couple seasons without winning. Not that I'm saying that the Lakers are not going to win next year, but that's an entirely different conversation. I just think it was really helpful for Ty Lue personally to have this year where people realized, like, yeah, he had a really good team that he was coaching, and talent-wise, it's not like he was hurting for guys. Kawhi Leonard is not LeBron, but he's what I believe a top 5 player in the league, so that's still a really good starting point. You've got Paul George, who was 13 All-NBA, so that puts you in that top 15 pretty comfortably. So yeah, he had a lot to work with, but I also think you saw, like you said, you saw some resilience from the Clippers, which was not there in the past, right? Like when they built a lead in the playoffs, other teams felt comfortable, right? Like you've got that series that they lost to Memphis back in the day when they were up 2-0, and they were up 2-0 on the Blazers in 2016 and gave up 4 in a row, although Chris and Blake got hurt in that series. They were obviously up 3-1 against the Rockets, blew that series, up 3-1 against the Nuggets last year, blew that series. And yet this season, when they had their backs against the wall, when they were in adverse situations, somehow like the best part of them came out. And I think a lot of that has to do with the players. They're the ones who are doing the job on the court, but the players were all crediting Ty Lue. They said that like his approach, his ability to be even keel, his ability to actually make adjustments, like you saw how the Clippers evolved over the course of these series, right? Like against Dallas, they start off playing their traditional starting lineup. By game 3, you've got Reggie Jackson in the starting lineup. And then they've completely eliminated Ivica Zubac from the rotation, and you've got Nick Batum as the starting center. And those are the kinds of things that just weren't happening in previous postseasons, right? Like Doc Rivers would have a plan and he would stick to it, and the other team would figure it out, and the Clippers would stick to their plan. And it's just cool to see how, this is a super deep team, right? Like there was a comfortable 11-man rotation that you would be happy with having in a postseason. And obviously you can't really play 11 players in a postseason series. So they'd have to roll that down to 8. And by the end of the season, like there weren't a lot of choices of who that 8 could be because there were only so many healthy players. But Ty Lue got everybody ready during the course of the season, right? Like there was this knock on the Clippers in 2019-20 that like, oh, we were injured all year. We never got a chance to develop any continuity. And that was sort of an excuse that was levied after they lost to the Nuggets. And the Clippers were pretty injured this year too, right? Like Paul George had this bone edema in his foot and he missed a lot of games, and Kawhi Leonard missed some games with the knee, and Patrick Beverley obviously missed a ton of games just because Patrick Beverley's always missing a ton of games, and like Ibaka was out, and like literally they were managing different starting lineups every other night, it seemed like. And under Ty Lue, that ended up being a strength for this team. Like the fact that they had to try so many different things, the fact that everybody was pushed into action at one point or another. Like there was a game where Yogi Ferrell literally won it for them in the 4th quarter against Memphis. And yeah, Yogi didn't play at all in the playoffs other than like, mop up duty at the very end of games. But like, it was just sort of a testament to the fact that like everybody got a chance to eat in this offense. Everybody got a chance to show what they were capable of doing. Like I saw former Clippers like Sindarius Thornwell tweeting that like, I wish Doc would have let me go like Ty Lue does with T-Man. And whether that's true or not, that Doc like didn't allow the younger players to develop, the perception matters, and the fact that like you've got 3 24-year-old guys in Kennard and Zubac and Mann who really made a difference during the regular season and made a difference during games in the playoffs. That just wasn't happening under the Doc Rivers time. And I think the fact that like Ty Lue was simultaneously able to empower these younger guys while also getting his superstars to play better than they have. I mean, Paul George was playing point guard for most of the last 8 games of the playoffs. I mean, he was playing point guard for a lot of the regular season. It's not a role that he has generally ever played. I mean, yeah, he turns the ball over a lot, and some of the turnovers are just like, oh my God, PG, what are you doing? But that ability just hadn't been a part of his game before. So, to develop young players and develop your stars at the same time, to have a successful regular season and a successful postseason, I think Ty Lue was just a rousing success in year 1. And yeah, I mean, there are some things that I quibbled with as far as his decision making, but like, no one's perfect. Like, but the fact that he got to this point and the players love him and are going to bat for him just all the time, unprompted, like it's a huge upgrade without even considering like what happened to Doc this year.
Well, the number 1 guy on the Clippers is Kawhi Leonard, and there's a lot of questions around Kawhi Leonard. So He got the health with his knee. Whether we don't know whether it's an ACL tear, still haven't heard anything from the Clippers on that, whether it's an ACL tear, on that or not. And then you have what's looming is that potentially Kawhi could opt out, but I think a lot of that will have to do with how healthy his knee is. How important or tense are these decisions for the Clippers and their fan base right now, sort of waiting to see what Kawhi will do? That holds a lot in terms of what the Clippers can do or what their future will be, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nerves around Kawhi's health. He gets hurt at the end of Game 4 against Utah, sits the last few minutes, and it's not really that big of a deal because the Clippers have a double-digit lead for most of that time. So you can kind of excuse it. He's asked after the game how he's feeling because he did sit the final few minutes. He says, "I'm fine." And then the very next day, or not even the very next day, the Clippers are traveling back to Salt Lake City. He's not even put on the injury report. Then finally, the day of the game, it is revealed that he has an ACL injury. There's speculation that it's a tear. No one is able to confirm exactly what kind of injury it is. The Clippers don't give any information, which is crazy because Ivica Zubac gets injured, in Game 4 of the Phoenix series, and the Clippers immediately reveal it to be a MCL sprain. We know more details about Zu's injury than Kawhi's, and I got to tell you, I think the swelling has gone down. I think they can get perfectly good imaging by now on Kawhi's injury. It's just a matter of being secretive, which is always a little frustrating because, we just don't know what we're dealing with, right? I know the Clippers know what they're dealing with, and there was a report that Kawhi maybe had a chance to reevaluate and come back for the finals had the Clippers made it. So that would suggest it's not a tear. I guess we're dealing with an ACL sprain. So at this point, you would expect him to be back for the start of next regular season. And that, I guess, leads us into his free agency, which he's definitely going to opt out. It financially doesn't make any sense for him to play the final year of this contract because he can make so much more money if he opts out and re-signs a new deal. I would expect that to be with the Clippers. The Clippers have made so many concessions for how Kawhi Leonard wants to operate, right? They've brought in his good friend Jeremy Castleberry as an assistant coach who has followed him from San Antonio to Toronto and now to Los Angeles. Poor Jeremy just looks so out of his depth without Kawhi on the court. He just had no idea what to do during timeouts for the last few games. They obviously, let him come in from San Diego. He doesn't have to live in LA. He's a little bit late sometimes for practices. The PR makes it so that he doesn't have to answer more than 4 questions at any time in a press conference. He is just empowered to be whoever he wants on this Clippers organization. And I'm not sure how many other teams would let him be like this. I've heard that the Heat and the Mavericks are pursuing Kawhi Leonard, and the Mavericks literally have nothing in place. I could see them catering their entire organization around Kawhi Leonard and Luka, and it wouldn't be a problem. But I don't know that Kawhi sees a better chance of winning there because, as great as Luka is, Paul George and Ty Lue and everything else the Clippers have, I think, is a better situation to collect another championship. Miami just doesn't make any sense to me because you hear all this stuff about heat culture, and Pat Riley getting on the scale and weighing himself before Jimmy Butler has to at their free agent meeting. And they're not gonna let Kawhi do whatever he wants. They didn't let LeBron do whatever he wanted. And Kawhi, for all his gifts, is not as good as LeBron. So for him to have the level of control that he has in Los Angeles, I just don't think he's getting that anywhere else with the same winning environment. Besides, he grew up here. He wanted to come back here, right? He's a Southern California kid. He likes tacos. It's not like he's going to get this environment anywhere else, just off the court with all of his family. He just had another kid. I have a hard time seeing him leaving the Clippers because he moved literally heaven and hell to come here, right? He made the Clippers give up all of those picks to get Paul George. He built this team in his image. He wanted to get more ball handlers. They traded for Rajon Rondo. I'm not saying that he couldn't leave, right? He's not the general manager. He didn't make all these decisions himself, but I would just be stunned if he left. Completely stunned. Stunned
if Kawhi leaves. So,
yeah.
If Kawhi stays, you think it's likely that he will stay. But where do the Clippers go from here? You talked about, Sabreena, how they have a bunch of free agents coming up, a lot of decisions to make on some guys. Reggie Jackson comes to mind. Where do they go from here in terms of improving the roster or getting the roster to a place where they can win an NBA championship in the 2021-2022 season?
Yeah, so I think the number one question is at point guard. Their starting point guard has been Patrick Beverley at the start of the last 4 regular seasons. He's not ended the season as a starting point guard a couple of those times because of injuries, and this past year, Reggie Jackson just took the job from him because he was better. Pat still has 1 year left on his contract. I don't think that the Clippers are married to keeping him around. He is the only player left from the core that came in the Chris Paul trade. That was him and Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. The other 2 are gone. I don't think the Clippers have any nostalgia for that particular era. I think that they'd be perfectly happy clearing house and just letting this be the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George show. That being said, I don't really know what Pat's value is at, considering the injuries, considering the fact that he's probably going to start the season suspended because of what he did to Chris Paul in Game 6. I don't know how much they can count on him, to be there 82 games, all the games in the playoffs. I do think they would like to go into next season with Reggie Jackson as the starting point guard, but Reggie's a free agent and doesn't have to come back if he doesn't want to. He's going to get paid by somebody else. I'm sure of that. Whether that's a situation he wants to go to is an open question. San Antonio could pay him and he'd be the best shooter on that roster and create some spacing for all of those young guys to do their thing in transition. New York could pay him, right? How much could New York use an actual offensive threat at point guard, so you can move Derrick Rose back into that 6th man role? What a great fit that would be. And Tibbs makes defense work for everybody, right? So even Reggie being somewhat limited on that end of the court is not a huge deal with the Knicks. I don't really see him going back to a rebuilding team because he's done that. He was in Detroit for a little while. I think the taste of winning makes it hard to go to a team that's at least not competing for the playoffs. I really have no idea what's going to happen with Reggie because it's been documented that he's best buds with Paul George. That's why he wanted to come to LA. They're represented by the same agent. He feels very comfortable here. Ty Lue is a good fit for him, in terms of what he wants to do in the offense. Obviously, the Clippers made him look really good, and he made the Clippers look really good. It's been a very good relationship for the both of them. But that's the number one domino, right? If you don't get Reggie Jackson back, are you comfortable with having Pat as the point guard? Is Luke Kennard going to take more of that responsibility? Do we see Terrence Mann flash his ball skills a little bit more? I think what the Clippers are is so dependent on Reggie Jackson at this point, which is a crazy thought. Reggie Jackson, right? This guy who played 3 minutes in the last 5 games of the Denver series last year and is known as the guy who willed his way out of Oklahoma City because he thought he was better than Russell Westbrook. He was better than Russell Westbrook in these playoffs. That's for damn sure. It just took a little bit while. I think that's the number one question, right? Can you get Reggie to come back? Because it's not really in the Clippers' control. They don't have the money to pay him what other teams can. It's just a matter of, does he like this fit better than other places, right? That happens sometimes, right? Nick Batum was a free agent this past offseason, after the Hornets bottom out. Other teams could have offered him more money. The Clippers could have offered him more money. But he took a minimum because he liked the opportunity to be part of this redemption story with the Clippers while he was individually redeeming himself, right? And he's still getting paid a lot from the Hornets. He can stand to take a pay cut from another team. I do think that he's also earned himself a raise. But Batum, I think, is not going to demand nearly as much as Reggie just because he's not nearly the offensive performer in terms of points, which still gets dollars, right? As much as I like what Nick Batum does on the offensive end, if he's not scoring like Reggie does, he's just not going to get paid like Reggie does. And also because I think they're going to have to load manage the crap out of him during the regular season. He's just not capable of playing the kind of minutes that the Clippers demanded of him this year. So they're going to have to be a lot more careful. And whichever team does get him would have to be a lot more careful about what he plays during the first 82. But I almost think that Jackson is more important than Batum because they need that extra ball handler. They need that extra juice going to the basket in transition because Rondo was not it. For whatever reason, playoff Rondo turned into a pumpkin when he joined the Clippers. So, yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like the Clippers offseason, really revolves around what happens with Reggie and then how they replace that production if he ends up going elsewhere. Heard on a podcast yesterday that Zach Lowe says that he thinks that the LA teams, both the Lakers and the Clippers, will be sniffing around Kemba Walker. I'm not really sure how the Clippers get that done because OKC is going to demand picks, and they already have all the Clippers picks. Does the expiring contract of Patrick Beverley do anything for you? Like, I doubt it. So how you upgrade that position without bringing Jackson back is not immediately clear to me.
Yeah, and you're right. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. If they bring Jackson back, he was so great in playoffs. As you said, a lot of questions from the Clippers, but you said the fans couldn't be a little bit optimistic heading into next season after what they've seen this season. That's Sabreena Merchant. You can catch her writing on SB Nation. She is great, covering everything in LA sports and knows so much about the Clippers. Sabreena, thanks for joining me on the NBA Exchange.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And if you have any WNBA fans here too, I do a YouTube show called The Step Through that comes out once a week, so you can check that out.